Welcome back, my friend. Tonight, I invite you to rest your head, slow your breath, and drift once more into the soft, ancient world of Greek myth, a world where stories move like quiet winds through marble halls, and the gods speak not in thunder, but in whispers. You have traveled far in this series, and every step has carried you deeper into Olympus' sleeping memory. We began with Zeus, the king crowned in lightning, whose storms echo through the sky even as you fall gently towards sleep. We met Hera, the queen whose whisper carried the weight of jealousy, pride, and the old, unshakable dignity of Olympus. We swam beside Poseidon, sinking into the cool blue darkness of his endless sea, calm and ancient as the night itself. We walked into the silent shadows with Hades, learning that the underworld is not full of fear, but of stillness and unbroken hush. We drifted through the rose-gold glow of Aphrodite, wrapped in her quiet beauty and the soft pulse of longing that follows her wherever she goes. We felt the warmth of Apollo, rising like morning light across the horizon of your thoughts, easing the world into calm. We followed Artemis beneath the moon, her footsteps light as silver dust across the forest floor. We listened to the heartbeat of battle through Ares, the fire of conflict softened into ember and story as you drifted towards sleep. Each of these gods shaped Olympus in their own way, their stories weaving together like threads of twilight and dawn. But tonight, we turn to the god who shaped Olympus not with thunder or power, but with his hands. A quiet god, a patient god, a god born into perfection, but not perfect. A god who fell and rose again. Tonight, we fall asleep to Hephaestus, the gentle fire, the soft forging heart of Olympus, the one who stood between beauty and burden, between light and shadow, between rejection and creation. Where Zeus commanded the sky, Hephaestus shaped the tools that held it together. Where Apollo played golden melodies, Hephaestus forged the instruments that carried those celestial notes. Where Ares strode into war, Hephaestus crafted the armor that wrapped the god of battle in unbreakable bronze. And where Aphrodite shimmered with irresistible beauty, Hephaestus' hands shaped the jewels that crowned her divine radiance. Hephaestus is the hidden pulse inside every story you've heard so far. He is the quiet craftsman behind the thunder, behind the arrows, behind the chariots of sun and moon, behind the weapons of gods and the wonders of heroes. Yet, he began his life as the child unwelcomed, the child cast aside, the child who fell from the shining heights of Olympus into the endless sky below, a fall that lasted 9 days and 9 nights, drifting alone through clouds and silence. But every fall, in myth, is only the beginning of a deeper rise, and every wounded god carries within them a softer kind of strength. That is the story we enter tonight. A story not of battles, or rage, or thunder, but of resilience, quiet creation, and the warmth of a forge glowing softly in the dark. So now, wherever you are, let your breath slow, let your eyelids grow heavy, let your thoughts move like warm smoke curling upward from a gentle flame, and allow me to guide you, step by step, into the life of Hephaestus. From the moment he opened his eyes beneath the cold gaze of Olympus, to the day he descended through air and cloud, falling toward the sea, to the quiet years he spent beneath the waves, shaping metal in the company of gentle goddesses, to the throne he forged with hands steady and patient, to the day he returned, not as a castaway, but as the master of divine craft. This is his story, the story that waits for you now, soft as embers, warm as breath, shaped in shadows and firelight. So come with me, rest with me, and fall asleep to the quiet forging of Olympus through the hands of Hephaestus. Tonight, let your breath soften as the world around you grows quiet. Let the last thoughts of your day dissolve like mist fading under a gentle morning sun, and allow yourself to step once more into the dreamlike realm of Olympus, where ancient stories drift through the air like warm smoke rising from a hidden fire. You have traveled this world with me before, moving through each myth not with fear or urgency, but with calm curiosity, as if walking through a temple lit only by soft candlelight. Every chapter of this series has been a slow exhale, a quiet descent into old stories made gentle, reshaped for sleep, softened into whispers. You have heard thunder, but through a calming distance. You have seen gods rise in power, but from a peaceful place where even their storms felt muted, softened, and safe. And now, as you settle into this familiar space, I invite you to return to that softness, to rest in the warm glow of a story shaped not by lightning or battle, but by the quiet ember of creation itself. Tonight, we fall asleep to Hephaestus, the gentle flame of Olympus, the soft forge glowing in the shadows, the god who builds what others only command. In earlier nights, we followed Zeus, the king whose thunder rolled across the heavens, shaping the fate of gods and mortals alike. We heard his storms echo in the distance, softened until they became little more than the hum of faraway rain. We listened to Hera's steady heartbeat of pride and sorrow, her quiet strength unfolding like a cold, regal wind moving through marble halls. We walked through the seas beside Poseidon, where waves whispered in deep blue, carrying secrets older than Olympus itself. We descended into the stillness of Hades, discovering that even the underworld holds a silence gentle enough to cradle sleep. We drifted through the soft rose-gold glow of Aphrodite, wrapped in the delicate shimmer of her beauty and the soothing hush of longing. We stepped beneath the sunlight of Apollo, warm and comforting, like the last touch of day resting on your skin. We followed Artemis under the moon, her pale glow guiding us through quiet forests where shadows move like silk. And we heard the softened echo of war through Ares, whose fiery nature was tamed into a slow, pulsing ember in the dark. Each of these stories shaped Olympus in their own way. Each carried you deeper into this ancient world, resting gently between myth and dream. But tonight's god is different. He is not born from thunder, nor made from beauty, nor carried by sunlight, nor sharpened by war. He is not the roar of Olympus, he is its breath, a slow, steady exhalation of firelight, a soft rhythm of metal and heat, a quiet, constant glow. While the other gods burst into the world in brilliant flashes, lightning, foam, fire, moonlight, Hephaestus arrived quietly, without spectacle, without celebration, without the perfection Olympus demanded. Not born into power, not born into privilege, but born into hardship, born into a moment of disappointment, born into a world where his first breath was met not with pride, but with rejection. And yet, from that first moment of being cast aside, something gentle began to form within him, a resilience that glowed like a coal hidden under ash, a creativity born not from dominance, but from longing, a strength made not from command, but from patience. Where Zeus rules the sky, Hephaestus shaped the tools that hold the sky together. Where Apollo carries the light, Hephaestus forged the chariot that bears it. Where Ares wields weapons in the fury of war, Hephaestus crafted each blade, each shield, each piece of armor that protects the god of battle. Where Aphrodite glides in beauty, Hephaestus is the one who crowned her radiance with jewels made from metals that shimmer like starlight. He is the silent architect behind every shining victory, every divine symbol, every artifact whispered about in myth. His hands shaped Olympus far more than any roar of thunder or crash of waves, yet he did so quietly, gently, unseen, underappreciated. Hephaestus did not inherit glory, he built it, piece by piece, breath by breath, strike by strike. He is the god of fire, but not the kind that destroys. His fire warms, his fire shapes, His fire gives life to metal, gives form to imagination, gives purpose to raw material. His fire is the flame you sit beside when the night is long and cold, the flame that comforts rather than frightens, the flame that stays. And so, tonight, as you rest, we step into his story with the same quiet patience that guided his hands. Imagine the forge before you, a warm glow pulsing softly like a heartbeat in the dark, the subtle crackle of embers breathing in and out, the gentle hum of metal cooling in calm, rhythmic sighs, no harsh sparks, no hammer striking violently, just the steady warmth of a god working slowly, shaping not just weapons and wonders, but shaping himself, forging his identity the way he forged every masterpiece, with care, with intention, with devotion to craft rather than power. In a world of gods who dominate through force or charisma, Hephaestus stands as a reminder of a different kind of strength. The strength of endurance, the strength of creation, the strength of rising quietly, without fanfare, to become essential to everything around him. Hephaestus is the gentle heart of Olympus, beating softly beneath all the noise. And tonight, in this soft glow of myth and warmth, we follow that heart. We follow it down into the quiet fire, into the story of a god who was never meant to rise, and yet became the one who lifted Olympus with his own hands. So breathe with me now, slow, steady, warm. Let the world outside fade into the soft crackle of an ancient forge. Let the glow of Hephaestus' fire surround you, and sink gently into the story of the quiet flame of Olympus. Settle in now. Let your breath slow again as we return to the very beginning of Hephaestus' life. A beginning not wrapped in celebration or golden prophecy, but wrapped in jealousy, tension, and the quiet ache of a goddess who felt less seen in her own home. This moment, the moment of Hephaestus' birth, has always existed in the shadows of Olympus. A story whispered softly, a story that lives in the spaces between pride and hurt, between expectation and disappointment. A story that mirrors another tale you heard earlier in this series, the birth of Athena, for everything begins there. With the moment Zeus split open the sky, and then split open his own head. From that wound of light, Athena emerged full-grown, radiant, armored, perfect. A child born not from tenderness, but from authority, not from union, but from dominion. And Hera watched. She watched her husband bring forth a daughter entirely on his own, without her, without a mother, without a partner, without balance. The same Zeus who demanded loyalty, who demanded obedience, who demanded that all creation move through him, had taken creation for himself. And Hera, queen of the gods, guardian of marriage, protector of childbirth, felt something cold settle into her bones, a feeling she had long tried to bury, a feeling named jealousy, a feeling named injustice, a feeling named not enough. She felt Zeus had taken something sacred away from her, and she felt the eyes of Olympus judging her silence. Athena's birth was a triumph for Zeus, but a wound for Hera, and it is from this wound that Hephaestus' story begins. According to the old sources, Hera stood in the golden halls of Olympus, her heart full of indignation and her pride sharpened like a blade. If Zeus can create a child without me, she whispered to herself, then so can I. And so she did, or so one version of the story says, a version preserved in ancient tradition and echoed across centuries, a version that lives like a scar on the mythology of Olympus, a version that tells us Hera conceived Hephaestus alone without Zeus' touch, without his consent, without his involvement of any kind, not out of love, but out of retaliation, out of a desire to prove her own power, out of the sting of being overshadowed by Zeus' brilliance. She wanted to show the king of the gods that she too possessed the divine spark of creation, that she too could call life forth from nothing, that she too belonged at the center of Olympus' power. But creation born from anger rarely emerges gentle, and the child who came from Hera's defiance did not match the perfection she expected. Hephaestus was born small, fragile, imperfect. The myths say he was born with legs that bent the wrong way, or feet that could not carry him, or bones that curved instead of straightened. Different sources describe it differently, but all agree he was not what Hera wanted him to be, not what she needed him to be. He did not shine like Athena. He did not blaze like Apollo. He did not roar like Ares. He was quiet, soft, unassuming. A child who arrived not with a burst of power, but with a flicker, a spark struggling to stay alive. And Hera, who prized beauty and divine perfection above all things, looked upon him with a tightening of her heart. Not love tightening, but disappointment tightening, and shame. In Olympus, perfection was expected, imperfection was feared. Even the smallest flaw could ripple through the court of gods and stir whispers like harsh winds. And so, when Hera saw her son's slight twisted form, she felt the judgment of Olympus pressing against her skin. A queen who had birthed a child who did not look like a god. A queen who wanted to prove her power, and instead revealed her vulnerability. And Hera, who loved fiercely but punished even more fiercely, could not bear the weight of her own shame. Some say she hesitated only a moment before taking the child in her arms. Some say she held him long enough for hope to rise and then fall. Some say, she whispered, "You should have been perfect," before she acted. But all the myths agree on what happened next. Hera lifted her newborn child, walked to the edge of Olympus, and let him go, let him fall, let him tumble through clouds and silence and sky, all because he did not reflect the perfection she wished to show the world, all because his tiny, fragile body reminded her of her own imperfections, all because he was not Athena. Hephaestus fell for 9 days and 9 nights, drifting through the endless air, his small form twisting softly in the wind like a spark carried by a storm. He did not cry, not loudly, at least. Perhaps only a soft, thin sound like the faint whistle of something too small to be heard. And Olympus, towering above him, grew smaller with each passing breath. But that is one version. There is another. Another story whispered in quieter circles. A story that softens Hera's cruelty and shifts the blame towards Zeus. This version says Zeus was the father, that Hephaestus was the natural child of Zeus and Hera together, born legitimately, born properly, born as any Olympian should be. But when Hera once again rose in fury against Zeus, when her anger became a weapon sharper than any blade, a young Hephaestus dared to stand between them. He tried to protect her. He tried to shield his mother from Zeus' wrath. A small act of loyalty, a small act of courage. And Zeus, furious at the defiance, seized the boy by the ankle and hurled him from Olympus with a violent force that rippled through the sky like a crack of thunder. This version implies Hephaestus' disability came from the fall rather than before it. That Zeus' anger twisted the boy's leg forever. That the king of the gods injured his own child and never once reached down to catch him. 2 stories, 2 wounds, 2 truths woven through myth. One blames Hera, one blames Zeus, but both end the same, with a child falling, with a child unwanted, with a child cast from the highest peak of creation into the world below. Hephaestus' birth, unlike the triumphant shouts that accompanied Athena or Apollo, was a quiet tragedy. A story of jealousy, a story of wounded pride, a story of a god whose first breath was met not by love, but by rejection. And yet, even here, even in this painful beginning, something remarkable was forming, something that would shape not just Hephaestus' life but Olympus itself. Because creation born from jealousy still contains the spark of the divine. Because imperfection does not mean weakness, only difference. Because the gods, for all their might, often fail to see what is truly valuable until it glows before them. Hephaestus was not born perfect, but he was born capable of things no perfect god could ever achieve. The myths say Hera did not know this. Zeus did not see it. Olympus did not imagine it. But the world below did. The sea did. The deep places of the earth did. And as the newborn god fell slow, silent, spiraling destiny began to kindle inside him. A spark, a glow, a warmth, waiting to become flame. And so we follow him now, downward, away from Olympus' shimmering towers, away from the judgment of gods who refuse to see beyond the surface of a child's skin, because the gods, for all their might, often fail to see what is truly valuable until it glows before them. Hephaestus was not born perfect, but he was born capable of things no perfect god could ever achieve. The myths say Hera did not know this. Zeus did not see it. Olympus did not imagine it. But the world below did. The sea did. The deep places of the earth did. And as the newborn god fell slow, silent, spiraling destiny began to kindle inside him, a spark, a glow, a warmth waiting to become flame. And so we follow him now, downward, away from Olympus' shimmering towers, away from the judgment of gods who refuse to see beyond the surface of a child's skin. Know that even in this descent, the soft forge of Hephaestus is already stirring, already glowing, already beginning its slow, gentle work. Because from jealousy comes transformation, from imperfection comes resilience, and from rejection comes the god who will one day build Olympus itself. Let the story continue to warm you. Let it settle into your breath. And prepare yourself for what comes next. The 9 quiet years beneath the sea, where a discarded child becomes a craftsman of wonders. Now, let us drift together into the quiet moment when the heavens opened beneath the small body of a newborn god. A moment suspended between breath and emptiness. A moment that mirrors every exile that came before it, and every exile that would come after. Because Hephaestus' fall was not the first fall from Olympus, nor would it be the last. And to understand his descent, we must gently open the tapestry of memory woven through earlier gods you already met in this series. We must step back into the quiet shadows of those who were cast away long before Hephaestus ever took his first breath. We must remember the Titans, the ancient rulers, the ones thrown from mountain tops during the Great War between old and new. Their fall shook the foundations of the cosmos, echoing through every cave, every sea trench, every forgotten valley where their heavy forms crashed into the world below. But their fall was born from conflict, from rebellion, from a war that cracked the sky. And then there was Hades, not thrown violently, no, but sent downward all the same, a descent sealed by fate, by duty, by the quiet necessity of balance. He was not rejected, he was not unwanted, but he, too, became a god who lived outside Olympus, deep beneath the world, wrapped in shadows, ruling a quiet kingdom of echoes and souls. Every exile carries a different weight. The Titans fell in fire, Hades fell in destiny. But Hephaestus, he fell in silence. He fell in loneliness. He fell because a mother or a father, depending on which old whisper you follow, looked upon him and said, no. His exile was not written by prophecy, not demanded by war, not shaped by cosmic law. It came from rejection, a rejection sharper than lightning and quieter than breath. So now, imagine this with me. A child held for one brief moment in the hands of the divine. Hands that should have comforted him. hands that should have welcomed him into the world, hands that instead released him. The air beneath him opened wide, stretching into a glowing abyss of dawn-colored cloud. Olympus rose above him, beautiful, cold, distant, its towers shimmering like polished marble caught in morning light. And he began to fall. He fell softly, drifting through clouds like embers carried on a gentle wind. The myths say 9 days and 9 nights passed as he tumbled through the open sky. But time moves differently for gods, and differently still for the newly born. Perhaps for Hephaestus it felt like eternity, or perhaps he felt nothing at all. Perhaps the sky felt like a cradle. Perhaps the clouds wrapped around him like blankets woven from sunlight and mist. We cannot know. We can only drift with him. Downward, downward, downward. Let your breath fall in the same slow rhythm as his small body spinning weightlessly through air. Imagine the world beneath him, opening gradually, as if the sea itself were rising to meet him, glowing in layers of deep blue and silver. Above him, Olympus shrank until it became just a pale spark. Not unlike the spark he carried within him, a spark so small it nearly vanished, but a spark all the same. As Hephaestus continued his descent, the sky around him shifted through every color the gods had ever known. Soft rose, lavender gray, warm gold. The tender blue of early dawn. And still, he fell. He fell past birds who had no words for pity, past winds that whispered through his tiny limbs, past the mountain peaks where ancient spirits watched silently from crags of stone. He fell past the last traces of Olympus light and into the gentle breath of the world below. Let us pause here. Take a breath with him. Feel the way the air changes from thin and cold to thick and warm. Feel the way gravity becomes less a force and more a lullaby. Because in that long descent, something else was happening, something deeper, something he did not yet understand. Every exile in myth carries a secret shape, a hidden purpose, a wound that becomes a doorway. When Kronos was cast down, his fall made space for a new age. When Hades was sent below, his fall created balance between life and death. And when Hephaestus fell, his fall forged the beginning of resilience, patience, creativity, a strength built not from power, but from survival. As he drifted downward, the world did not reject him. The sea did not flinch. The earth did not turn away. Instead, the deep waters opened their arms, and the goddesses who dwelled within them, Thetis and Eurynome, lifted their gaze to the sky. They saw a small shape falling through light, a shape that glowed dimly like a tiny coal struggling beneath ash, and they moved toward it with tender purpose. But before they caught him, before the sea wrapped him in cool blue darkness, let us return once more to those 9 days in the sky, because those 9 days echo the 9 nights Persephone spends beneath the earth each winter. They echo the 9 waves rolled by Poseidon during his storms. They echo the 9 muses Apollo calls upon for songs. 9 is a sacred number in Greek myth, a number of cycles, a number of transformation, a number of rebirth. And so, Hephaestus' fall was not merely a fall, it was a passage, a ritual, a slow shedding of Olympus like dry skin from a tender wound. While he drifted, Olympus forgot him, or pretended to, or tried to. But the world below remembered. The world always remembers the fallen. Ask Hades, who built a kingdom from shadows. Ask Prometheus, who paid the price for offering fire to humankind. Ask the Titans, who sleep in the depths of the earth, dreaming of a world that once belonged to them. All of them were exiles in their own ways. But Hephaestus' fall was the quietest, and sometimes the quietest wounds shaped the deepest destinies. As the newborn god drifted through the hours, the sky carried him with a softness surprising for such a long descent. The wind did not whip or tear. It wrapped him gently, as though recognizing his fragility. The clouds did not chill him. They cushioned him, layer upon layer, like the softest down. Even the sun, moving across the heavens, seemed to lower its glare for him, letting its warmth brush him rather than burn. There is a tenderness in this story that often goes unnoticed, a tenderness that reminds us that even when the gods reject, the world itself may still hold compassion, a compassion that rose from the sea, from the deep home of ancient goddesses, from a place older than Olympus, older even than Zeus' reign. The ocean has always cared for the abandoned. It cared for the Titan's children hiding beneath its surface. It cared for Perseus when he floated as an infant in a wooden box. It cared for Aphrodite when she rose from its foam. And now, it cared for Hephaestus, because the sea is patient, because the sea forgives, because the sea knows every kind of exile, the violent, the gentle, the forgotten. And so, on the 9th day, when the sky had carried the child as far as it could, when Olympus had vanished completely from view, when the air grew heavy and the clouds parted like a curtain of silk, the waves rose up. They rose carefully, as though afraid to startle him. They rose slowly, like hands waiting to catch a fragile thing. And they received him, not with a splash, but with a hush. A soft sigh of water embracing a fallen god. The sea swallowed the shame Olympus cast out. The sea took in the child no one else wanted. The sea became the cradle Olympus refused to hold. And as the water wrapped around him cool, dark, ancient Hephaestus' long fall finally ended. But this was not the end of his exile. It was the beginning of something much gentler, much warmer, much more transformative. Because now, he was no longer falling. He was being carried down into the realm of Thetis, down into the quiet domain of Eurynome, down into 9 years of healing and creation beneath the waves, a place where a forgotten child would learn to turn metal into beauty, a place where rejection would melt away into the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of the sea, a place where he would discover that the fire within him, small as it seemed, could glow even in the darkest depths. So rest with this moment. Feel the fall fade into stillness. Feel the descent soften into a cradle. Feel the exile transform into a beginning. Because Hephaestus may have been cast away from Olympus, but he was not lost. He was merely falling toward the life he was meant to build, toward the craft he was destined to learn, toward the quiet warmth that would one day reshape the world of gods. The fall was painful, yes, but the fall was necessary because to forge something beautiful, metal must first be broken. And to forge a god who would shape Olympus, a fragile newborn had to fall. Let that truth settle in your breath. Let it settle in your chest. Let it settle in the slow rhythm of your heart. Hephaestus fell softly, drifting through clouds like embers. And now, when the 9th day ended, and the sky finally exhaled its long breath, the newborn god slipped gently into the waiting arms of the sea. Not with violence, not with thunder, not like the Titans who crashed into the deep with the roar of broken mountains, not like the monsters hurled into Tartarus, sinking like stones through darkness. Hephaestus entered the sea the way a sigh enters the lungs, softly, naturally, as if he had always belonged there. The waters parted around him, warm and shimmering, glowing faintly like liquid starlight. The sea did not judge him, did not recoil at the sight of his tiny, imperfect form, did not ask why Olympus had let him go. It simply received him, as though the ocean had been waiting, as though it had known the child would fall, as though it recognized the spark hidden beneath his fragile exterior, a spark that the heavens had dismissed, but the sea understood, because the sea is ancient, older than Olympus, older than Zeus, older than the very gods who claim dominion over its waves. It remembers every exile, every forgotten child, every god or mortal who ever slipped through the cracks of fate. You learned this in our journey with Poseidon. You heard how the deep blue halls of his kingdom cradle the broken and the lost, how the sea became a sanctuary for Thalassas' children, how it softened the fury of storms and held within it the first whisper of life itself. And so, when Hephaestus fell, the sea responded in the only way it knows, with mercy, with gentleness, with open arms. The waves curled around the newborn god, lifting him like a cradle woven from foam and moonlight. The water brushed against his skin with the softness of a lullaby. His tiny limbs finally stopped trembling. The wind stopped pushing him. The sky released him. He was no longer falling. He was floating, suspended in a world where weight no longer mattered, where imperfections no longer marked him, where silence hummed like a mother's heartbeat. And then she arrived. Thetis, the silver-footed goddess, the daughter of Nereus, the old man of the sea, and one of the most gentle beings ever shaped by divine waters. Her presence did not disturb the ocean. When she moved, the currents shifted in elegant spirals, as though eager to follow her. Her hair flowed behind her like strands of liquid gold. Her eyes shimmered with the calm knowing of countless tides. And when she saw the small god drifting alone, she stopped. A pause, a soft intake of breath, a quiet recognition, as if she were witnessing not a discarded child, but a sacred thing, a fragile ember glowing at the bottom of the cosmos. Thetis reached out, her hands moving through water like moonlit silk. She gathered the child against her chest, cradling him with a tenderness he had never known on Olympus. He did not cry, not even then. Perhaps he did not know how. Perhaps he had already learned that sound brought nothing but pain. Or perhaps he felt, for the first time, a sense of belonging. The sea around them brightened, the currents warmed. Small fish, curious and shimmering like tiny jewels, swam in slow circles around the goddess and her new companion. Even the distant whales hummed in low, echoing tones, a song of welcome. The sea does not speak with words. It speaks with movement, with temperature, with rhythm, and every element of it whispered the same message. He is one of ours now. But Thetis was not the only goddess who heard the ocean stir. From deeper in the kelp forests, from a place where green light filtered like stained glass, another figure emerged, Eurynome, the ocean queen of grace, the mother of beauty long before Aphrodite ever touched the shores of the world. She was older than Olympus, older than Hera's jealousy, older than Zeus' thunder. Her presence was serene, powerful, and patient like the slow rising of a tide that had seen continents born and drowned. She approached Thetis, her steps measured, her expression soft. When her eyes fell upon the child, they softened further. "This one was cast away," she murmured, her voice flowing like a current. Thetis nodded. "Then we will lift him." And with that decision, the sea changed its course. For 9 years, 9 long, gentle years, the ocean would become Hephaestus' refuge, his shelter, his first home. But before we drift into those years, let us linger in this moment. This quiet joining of 3 destinies, the fallen child, and the 2 goddesses who chose to raise him, because this moment shaped everything that came after. Thetis was nurturing, Eurynome was wise, and together they created a sanctuary unlike any other in the mythic world. They carried Hephaestus through forests of seaweed that swayed like green cathedrals. They carried him past coral gardens glowing with soft pinks and blues. They carried him into their underwater halls where ancient magic hummed faintly through every stone and shell. Here, in a palace carved from pearl and illuminated by drifting bioluminescent lights, they laid him down upon a bed woven from seagrass and warm currents. The child breathed slowly, deeply, his small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matched the pulse of the tide. Thetis brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Eurynome touched his cheek, feeling the warmth that already lived beneath his skin, the warmth of a hidden fire. Neither goddess spoke of his deformity. Neither goddess questioned his worth. Neither goddess asked why Olympus had rejected him. The sea does not ask such things. It simply receives, and then it heals, slowly, quietly, patiently, just as it had healed others before, just as it had healed storms, shipwrecks, wounded travelers, broken gods, and now it would heal Hephaestus, not by hiding his differences, but by giving him the space to grow within them. Thetis and Eurynome rocked him gently, letting the currents soothe him into sleep. The ocean whispered around them, a lullaby made of waves touching distant shores, a lullaby older than any myth, older than any prophecy, older than Olympus itself. For Thetis knew something no one else knew. Eurynome saw something no one else saw. They saw potential. They saw resilience. They saw a spark waiting to become a blaze. Hephaestus' fall had been long, but his ascent would begin here, in the quietest place, in the deepest refuge, in the home of goddesses who understood that strength is often born from fragility. And so his 9 years beneath the sea began. Years of calm, years of learning, years of soft transformation, years that would shape the greatest craftsman the world had ever known. But those years are a story of their own, and we will drift into them gently, very gently. For now, let this image stay with you, a newborn god, wrapped not in divine glory, but in the soft, warm arms of the ocean. A child the heavens rejected, a child the sea embraced, a child whose quiet flame would one day reshape Olympus itself. In the quiet blue chambers of the sea, far below the reach of Olympus' judgment, Hephaestus lay sleeping in the arms of the goddesses who had claimed him not by blood, but by compassion. Thetis, gentle as moonlit water. Eurynome, graceful as the first dawn shimmering on the surface of the waves. Together, they became the guardians of a life the heavens had cast away. For 9 years, these two divine women shaped the childhood of the god who would one day shape Olympus itself. But before he ever touched metal or fire, before he learned the secrets of forging and creation, he learned something far more important: what it means to be held, what it means to be protected, what it means to belong. The sea, as you learned in Poseidon's chapter, is the great refuge of forgotten things. It is the cradle of ancient life, the shelter of abandoned myths, the home of Thalassa, mother of waves, whose embrace feels like memory itself. And now it became the nursery for Hephaestus. Thetis was the first to teach him softness. She would carry him through forests of drifting seaweed where green strands brushed gently against his cheeks like the fingers of living ribbons. She would hum to him in a voice that blended seamlessly with the sound of the current, a low, melodic resonance that calmed even the restless creatures of the deep. When he cried, the ocean currents shifted to soothe him, cradling him back to quiet. When he slept, fish gathered around him in silent circles, their small bodies glowing faintly like dim lanterns. Eurynome, on the other hand, taught him grace. She was not soft like Thetis, she was elegant, measured, poised. Every step she took sent ripples across the water that moved with deliberate beauty. Her very presence brought harmony. And in her presence, Hephaestus slowly learned to breathe without fear. Together, Thetis and Eurynome created a balance: warmth and wisdom, comfort and instruction, affection and expectation. They knew the child in their care would grow into something extraordinary, even if Olympus had failed to see it. Thetis taught him about the creatures of the deep, how jellyfish glow like floating lanterns and how dolphins sing stories through waves. She placed tiny seashells in his hands, letting him feel their spiral ridges, telling him, everything in nature has a pattern. Every curve has a history. Every shell remembers the creature it once protected. And he listened. Even as a child, he listened. He traced those patterns over and over, his small fingers memorizing each line, each groove, each swirl, as though learning a language made of shape and form. It was the first sign of his gift, the first spark of the craftsman he would become. Eurynome, meanwhile, taught him movement. She taught him how water flows not chaotically, but with intention. She showed him how currents wrap around obstacles instead of breaking against them, how they bend gracefully, bowing before stone, slipping through cracks, adapting without surrender. Strength, she told him, does not always roar. Sometimes it moves quietly, sometimes it changes shape, sometimes it flows, and Hephaestus learned this too. He watched how Eurynome glided through the water as though it were an extension of her own body. He studied the rhythm of her steps, the way her arms curved like kelp stirred by gentle tides. He learned to move not despite his injured leg, but with it. Not by fighting his body, but by flowing with it. In time, the child who once fell helplessly from the sky began to swim with subtle grace, not fast, not powerfully, but beautifully, softly, like something created for the water. The sea healed him not by changing his shape, but by changing his relationship to it. He was no longer ashamed of the limb that Olympus had rejected. Here, it was simply part of him. He moved differently, yes, but difference was not failure. Not here, not in the domain of Thetis and Eurynome. They taught him this without ever using words. The sea itself carried the lesson. Still, the years were not only spent in play and comfort. The sea teaches in many ways, some gentle, some challenging. And for a child destined to become the god of craftsmen, the deep ocean offered its own kind of school. Thetis showed him the hidden volcanic vents at the floor of the ocean, cracks in the earth, where molten heat burst forth in shimmering waves. Light flickered there like breathing fire, illuminating the water with dancing hues of crimson and gold. Most creatures feared these vents. Most swam far around them. But Thetis carried Hephaestus close, letting him feel the warmth radiating through the currents. "Fire lives even in the deepest darkness," she whispered. And Hephaestus felt it, a distant echo, a recognition deeper than memory, as if the warmth were calling to him, as if it were a part of him, as if something buried inside his infant heart stirred in response. Eurynome noticed this. She watched as his eyes widened, reflecting the trembling golden glow of underwater fire. She saw how his fingers reached instinctively toward the warm light, yearning to touch, to shape, to understand. She placed a hand on his back and murmured, "There is craft in your bones. There is purpose in your hands. You were not made to destroy. You were made to create." Hephaestus did not yet understand the words, but they sank into him like seeds accepting the soil. And under the waves, with time, they began to root. The boy grew, slowly at first, then more confidently. He became curious, always touching, always exploring, always observing. He examined coral with the seriousness of a scholar. He would turn stones over and over, feeling their textures, comparing how one surface differed from another. He collected broken shells and tried to fit them back together, pressing pieces gently as though hoping they might fuse. He watched crabs weave delicate burrows in the sand and tried to trace their patterns. Everything was a lesson. Everything held meaning. Everything wanted to be understood. Thetis noticed how he traced spirals again and again. "How does it feel?" she asked him once. Hephaestus touched the curve of a shell, and though he was still too young for many words, he managed to whisper, "Warm and right." Eurynome smiled at that. "For a maker," she said, "what feels right becomes truth." But more than anything, more than shells, more than sand, more than coral, it was the volcanic glow that called to him again and again. Thetis took him there often, letting him rest against her shoulder as she swam through the heated currents. And every time, the warmth of the fire calmed him in a way nothing else did. The gentle heat soothed the old ache in his twisted leg. It relaxed the tightness in his small muscles. It made him feel, perhaps for the first time, not broken, but aligned. Aligned with something ancient, something that belonged to him, something that would one day roar inside a forge rather than sleep beneath an ocean floor. Eurynome sensed this as well. She understood that the boy had a destiny tied to fire, to metal, to creation, and she began to guide him more deliberately. She showed him how certain stones cracked open under heat to reveal shining metal inside. She taught him how shells hardened through time, how pressure shaped pearls, how minerals fused into new forms. These are the ways of the world, she told him. These are the secrets of transformation. And Hephaestus absorbed it all, not quickly, not perfectly, but deeply, like a sponge taking in water, like metal taking in heat, like a child taking in the first shape of his future. The underwater palace of Thetis and Eurynome became his entire universe. Soft blue ceilings woven from drifting currents, warm floors of smooth stone shaped by ancient tides, niches filled with treasures from every corner of the sea. He learned to walk differently, adjusting his steps to the water's buoyancy. He learned to use his hands more than his feet. He learned to observe before touching, to feel before judging, to listen before acting. He learned patience, something Olympus rarely taught. And he learned resilience, something no child should have to learn so young, but something he would turn into strength. Thetis would often hold him in her lap, stroking his hair as she whispered stories of the world above, stories of mountains that scraped the sky, stories of forests filled with silver animals, stories of storms that split the heavens in half. He listened with wide eyes. But he did not long for Olympus. Not yet. Not ever. In those early years, Eurynome would hum as she worked, weaving nets of sea thread and shaping delicate sculptures from coral. And Hephaestus would sit nearby, watching, his hands twitching with the desire to imitate what she did. He would pick up fragments of shell and attempt to arrange them the way she arranged coral. He would stack stones into small towers. He would attempt to smooth pieces of driftwood with small, awkward movements of his fingers. He never succeeded. Not yet, but he kept trying, and the goddesses kept smiling, because they knew what he did not, that these early attempts, these small movements, these unconscious habits, were the beginnings of mastery, the quiet roots of genius. A childhood unlike any other was unfolding beneath the sea. A childhood built not from privilege or power, but from care, from patience, from the soft rhythms of two goddesses who understood the value of a life others had thrown away. And when 9 years passed, when the child became something steadier, sharper, more aware, the fire within him finally stirred awake. But that awakening belongs to the next part of our tale. 9 years passed in the gentle breath of the ocean, each day drifting into the next like a long, warm exhale. Hephaestus grew in the slow, steady way of things raised by love rather than fear. The sea shaped him. The light shaped him. The warmth beneath the waters shaped him. But most of all, the quiet shaped him. For beneath the waves, silence is not empty. It is full of distant whale song, full of currents whispering secrets through drifting kelp, full of small, constant sounds that do not disturb the mind but cradle it. And it was inside this soft silence that Hephaestus' true nature began to rise, like a flame waking in the dark, like heat stirring beneath cold stone. Thetis saw it first. She noticed the way his eyes followed every shimmer of volcanic light leaking from cracks in the seafloor. She noticed the way his fingers twitched whenever heat brushed the water. She noticed the way he lingered near pockets of warm current, as if they spoke a language only he understood. Eurynome noticed it too, in the way he held shells with unexpected delicacy, turning them over as though searching for the story inside their curves, in the way he arranged pebbles into spirals, or traced the ridges of coral with reverence usually reserved for sacred things. There was a longing in him, a quiet yearning, not for Olympus, not for acceptance, but for creation, for shaping, for building, for transforming the world around him with his own hands. That longing glowed inside him like molten metal waiting for the right touch. And both goddesses knew it. This was no ordinary child, no fragile soul doomed by rejection. This was a maker, a silent architect, a mind shaped for craft the way rivers are shaped for flow. And so, gently, delicately, lovingly, they began to guide him toward the place where all creation begins heat. One morning, though morning means little beneath the sea, Thetis carried him deeper than they had ever traveled before. Past the kelp forests, where silver fish darted like strokes of quick light. Past coral towers rising like ancient temples carved by unseen hands. Past silent caverns and drifting gardens of anemones glowing faint blue. The water grew warmer, thicker, full of dancing flecks of golden light. Thetis held him close, whispering, "Do not fear what glows. Fire is not only destruction, it is also the first warmth of creation." Ahead of them, the ocean floor trembled. A soft pulse of energy rippled through the currents. Bubbles rose from cracks in the stone. The water shimmered in waves of red and orange. And then they reached it, the underwater vents, the womb of the earth, where molten heat poured from the world's core in slow, breathing fountains of brilliant color. It was like standing before a sleeping dragon whose body glowed with all the fires of the cosmos. Hephaestus stared, his small, uneven legs kicking gently in the water, his hands reaching out instinctively, his eyes wide, filled with a longing so deep it seemed to echo across the entire sea. The heat touched him, soft at first, then blooming across his skin like a memory he never knew he had. And something inside him answered. Something ancient, something powerful, something unmistakably divine. Eurynome arrived behind them, her movements calm, her expression serene. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is the first forge," she said quietly. "This is where the world itself was shaped." The boy reached toward the shimmering glow, not recklessly, not out of childish curiosity, but with recognition, with reverence, as though he were greeting an old friend. Eurynome continued, "Creation is not born from power. It is born from understanding, born from patience, born from the willingness to listen." Hephaestus listened. He listened to the crackle of heat underwater. He listened to the soft hum of molten rock cooling against the sea's embrace. He listened to the whisper of transformation itself. The way stone becomes metal, the way heat becomes shape, the way pressure becomes beauty. The sea taught him quietly, without words, without force. He would hold pieces of cooled volcanic rock in his hands, turning them over and over until he memorized every ridge and seam. He would scratch lines into softer stones, trying to mimic the patterns of shells or coral or fish scales. At first the lines were clumsy, awkward, barely visible. But day after day, week after week, year after year, his hands grew steadier, more confident, more precise. Even the sea creatures noticed. Octopuses drifted near, intrigued by his small experiments. Crabs would bring him objects, smooth stones, broken shells, beads of hardened resin from deep-sea plants, as though they understood he was learning, as though they wanted to help. And Thetis watched it all with a tenderness only a mother could feel. Hephaestus was growing, not in the way Olympus expected, not into a warrior, not into a ruler, not into a beautiful god of marble perfection, but into something far more rare, a creator, a child who could look at the raw matter of the world and see potential where others saw flaws. Eurynome nurtured that gift. She taught him how coral grows by layering tiny increments over centuries. First fragile, then strong, a living sculpture shaped slowly, patiently, lovingly. Creation is not a moment, she told him. It is a lifetime of moments, and Hephaestus absorbed the truth of that. Slowly, steadily, deeply. Sometimes Thetis would catch him sitting near the vents, eyes half closed, hands resting on warm stone, as though communing with the very heartbeat of the earth. Sometimes Eurynome would find him arranging small objects, pebbles, bones, shells, into shapes that hinted at the future. Tools, patterns, structures, ideas. The goddesses did not interrupt. They watched. They waited. They let him grow. Let him fail. Let him learn. For in the sea, failure is not a shame. It is simply part of the tide. One day, after years of quiet exploration, Hephaestus picked up a piece of cooled metal that had spilled from the vents. It was rough and uneven, jagged at one end, burnt black at the other. But he held it like treasure. He held it like possibility. Thetis knelt beside him, lowering herself to meet his gaze. "What do you see?" she whispered. Hephaestus traced the metal with his thumb. Its curves, its sharp angles, its imperfections. And then, softly, he whispered back, something new. It was the first lesson of the forge, the first spark of innovation, the first echo of the god he would soon become. He pressed the metal against warm stone, curving it slightly. He scraped its edge along the ground, smoothing it. He tapped it gently with a rock, shaping it bit by bit. Each movement small, tentative, uncertain, yet full of promise. The sound it made was faint, barely audible beneath the hum of the sea, but to Hephaestus it was music, a fragile, trembling song, a promise, a beginning. Eurynome placed her hand over his, her voice barely a ripple. "You do not yet know what you are," she said, "but the world already feels your becoming." Thetis touched his cheek. "Your fire is waking." And beneath their hands, warmth bloomed, soft, subtle, like the first breath of a sleeping flame. Hephaestus did not yet understand the significance of it, did not understand that the warmth came from him, not the metal, did not understand that the fire he sought was already inside his bones. But the goddesses knew, and the sea knew, and even the volcanic vents seemed to pulse in recognition, their glow brightening as though greeting a kindred spirit. Hephaestus pressed the metal again, more firmly, more intentionally, not forcing it, just guiding it, shaping it, becoming one with the slow dance of creation. And in that moment he forged his first piece. It was crude, it was uneven, it was small, but it was his. It was the first thing he had ever shaped with his own hands, the first sign of the craftsman who would one day build wonders for gods and heroes alike. Thetis lifted the piece gently. Eurynome smiled with quiet pride, and the ocean around them shimmered with faint light, as though blessing the moment. For the forge beneath the waves had awakened, and so had the god who would one day command the greatest forge in all of creation. The sea had carried him. The sea had healed him. The sea had taught him. But now the sea began to whisper a new message. It was time to rise, time to step out of the quiet nursery of deep waters, time to begin the long journey back toward the world above, toward Olympus, toward destiny. But that journey is a story for another chapter. Hephaestus had returned to Olympus with a quiet throne and a quieter purpose, and the great hall still hummed with the soft echo of his offering. Yet even the most solemn of moments in Olympus finds its relief, for the gods, like tides, need laughter as much as they need reverence. So it was that Dionysus arrived late, unsteady, and smelling faintly of fermented honey and night-blooming flowers. He came not as a herald of war nor as a scholar of lore, but as a wandering thread of mischief and mirth woven through the sober tapestry of the gods. If Olympus had a pulse for pleasure, Dionysus carried it in the jingle of his bracelets and the skip in his step. Where Hera embodied order and Athena embodied reason, Dionysus embodied the loosened knot in between the soft, laughing space, where rules could breathe for a moment. You already know him from our other nights, the one who stitches revelry into ritual, who teaches that wine is a kind of wisdom when sipped with care, and folly a kind of freedom when worn like a garland. Tonight he appears as a bridge, a warm, slightly tipsy hand reaching between the high drama of Hera and the stern austerity of the courts. He had watched the scene unfold from the shadows and saw that the hall held a tension that needed softening. So he burst in like late sunlight, scattering petals and a little too much laughter across the marble floor. He did not aim to steal attention only to ease it, not to mock, but to remind Olympus that even gods might benefit from a small, harmless wobble. When he saw Hephaestus standing there calm, collected, fire quiet, and seashore Dionysus grinned like a man who enjoys the pleasant surprise of a well-aged wine. "Ah," he announced with theatrical pleasure, "the house gains a new craftsman and a new excuse for a festival." His voice was light, carrying good humor like a soft banner that drifted through the room. He wandered closer, eyes dancing from the golden throne to Hera's softened expression, and then to Hephaestus' hands that still smelled faintly of molten memory. "You've made a very pretty chair," he said, utterly sincere, "and I can tell it fits a queen's back even when her heart is heavy." Hephaestus allowed a small, almost hidden smile to cross his face, and Ember answered by a friendly breeze. Dionysus leaned in as if sharing a secret and added, "Also, very practical for keeping the truth in the right seat." Laughter, soft and relieved, bubbled up around the hall like warm stream water. Even Ares, who prefers blunt force to subtlety, could not help but smirk. There is an art to Dionysus' comic relief, never cruel, never loud enough to wound, always gentle enough to invite a smile rather than a scowl. He does not take the stage away from tragedy. He merely sets a cup beside it, offering comfort to those who would otherwise be crushed by grandeur. Tonight that cup is full of merriment. As gods and goddesses exchanged glances, Dionysus moved among them like a bright breeze, setting down jokes as lightly as a cup of wine that leaves no scent behind but warmth. He praised the craftsmanship with a playful absurdity that warmed even Hera's guarded heart. "You, my friend, make furniture that hums with destiny. Be careful, or people will start asking you for life advice." He then produced from somewhere a small wreath of ivy and placed it atop Hephaestus' brow, with the solemnity of a toastmaster awarding a Heros medal. Hephaestus accepted it with the soft dignity of someone who has long ago learned the difference between honor and applause. Dionysus is, at heart, a connector. Where Hera's drama isolates, he invites. Where Ares' force divides, he blends. Where Olympus' ceremonies are polished to inflexibility, Dionysus sprinkles a little chaos that becomes new order when seen from morning light. So tonight, his role was twofold: to break the ice and to anchor the newly returned god in the social fabric of Olympus. He began to tell stories of small, ridiculous things, of nymphs who mistook their reflections for spouses, of satyrs who tried to knit ivy into armor, of mortals who offered him bad wine and yet received blessings in return. Each anecdote landed like a feather, lightening the room without making it frivolous. He patted Hephaestus on the back with companionable warmth, then raised a goblet in salute to Hera, encouraging her to loosen the stern lines of her face just enough for the truth to slip freely out. Dionysus knew how to speak without forcing confession. He knew how to make a queen lower her guard without losing her dignity. "You see," he said softly, "we gods are like a vineyard. A harsh winter might prune us, but a proper season lets sweetness grow." Hera's throat moved with a softened breath. Someone in the hall, perhaps Athena, brought forward a small, simple table with offerings of fruit and honey, and soon cups were passed, shared like small reconciliations. Dionysus made a playful toast, to the maker who sat in sea, to the queen who sat on gold, and to the mischief that makes stories softer to tell. The gods chuckled, the clinking of cups, a gentle percussion that erased some of the earlier austerity. Dionysus stayed at Hephaestus' side through the evening, telling jokes that never mocked the man's past, and stories that elevated his quiet strength into mythic lore. He spoke of Hephaestus' hands, as if they were instruments of music, shaping the world like a lyre shaped by patient fingers. The laughter became a balm. The soft pleasure of company made the hall feel less like a courtroom and more like a home. In the quiet moments between jokes, Dionysus also listened, because he understands that mirth and attention are twin gifts. He learned of Thetis and Eurinome's care, of the volcanic glow that had taught Hephaestus to temper, and of the long work that had shaped his heart. When Hera confessed quietly, haltingly, that she had once cast the child away, Dionysus did not seize the moment for mockery. Instead, he offered her a warm look and a single, disarming quip about the impracticality of casting away things you might regret. It was gentle enough to allow Hera to save face, honest enough to nudge her toward repair. By the time the evening wound down, the gods had shifted their stance, not out of forgetfulness of old slights, but with recognition of a story remade. Dionysus had performed a sacred function. He had braided a new thread into Olympus tapestry, and it was softer, more forgiving for his touch. He left small tokens behind, wine poured into cups that seemed to sprinkle laughter along the hall, wreaths of ivy draped on doorways, a promise whispered in the corridors that festivals would be less rigid and more joyous in the seasons to come. As he stumbled off gracefully, if one could call a god's stumble graceful toward his next errand of delight, he clapped Hephaestus on the shoulder with brotherly fondness. "You will be welcome at my feasts," he declared, half singing, "and always remember, if bronze grows cold, I will warm it with song." Hephaestus smiled, a private, ember smile, feeling an ease that was not forced. The hall felt lighter, the edges of old wounds smoothed with warmth. Dionysus' small comic relief had done its work, to remind gods that grief need not be forever, that dignity and laughter can coexist, and that belonging often arrives not with thunder, but with a hand extended across a table. As the reveler faded into the halls of Olympus, and music began to swell softly in distant rooms, the newly crowned craftsman stood for a moment and breathed in the mingled scents of ambrosia and laughter. He had come home not as a beggar for sympathy, but as a maker invited into the hearth. And somewhere, like a far-off bell, the promise of a festival bloomed into the night, gentle, joyful, and unmistakably human in its warmth. When the dust of reunion had settled, when Hera's apology had softened into something gentler than pride, when Dionysus' laughter had faded into warm echoes drifting down Olympus' marble corridors, Hephaestus found himself standing alone for the first time in the realm that had cast him away, alone but not abandoned, quiet but not forgotten, a part of Olympus, yet separate from it, like a single glowing ember resting at the edge of a great hearth. And it was in this quiet stillness that Zeus finally returned. The king stepped into the hall with the weight of storms wrapped around his shoulders, his thunderbolt humming in his hand like a caged tempest. He looked at Hephaestus, looked at Hera, looked at the golden throne glimmering in the shadows, and something old and heavy flickered in his eyes. Regret, recognition, a truth he had never allowed himself to speak. Zeus did not apologize, kings rarely do, But he did something unexpected, something rare, something meaningful. He placed his thunderbolt at Hephaestus' feet, a gesture older than Olympus, a gesture of respect, a gesture of acknowledgement, a gesture that said, "You have returned not as a child, but as a god." Hephaestus bowed, not because Zeus commanded it, but because the sky itself deserved reverence. Lightning hummed at his fingertips, and in that hum he heard destiny whisper, a whisper that had followed him from the depths of the sea to this shining hall, a whisper that said, "Build." And so Hephaestus began the climb toward the place he had sensed before ever seeing it, the forge of Olympus, his forge, hidden high in the mountain's spine, carved from stone older than gods, carved from heat older than time. The path spiraled upward like a sacred thread. Wind brushed his skin, clouds drifted beneath his feet. Olympus glowed in every direction, a palace of gold, marble, silver, and divine breath. But Hephaestus did not look back. His eyes were fixed ahead, fixed on the faint red glow pulsing like a distant heartbeat through cracks in the mountain wall. The higher he climbed, the deeper the pulse became. A slow, steady thrum, a rhythm that matched the fire inside his bones. It was like being called home, not a home he had ever walked through, but one he had carried within him since the day he was born. When he reached the mouth of the forge, the world shifted. The air thickened with heat. The earth trembled beneath his feet, and in the dim orange glow ahead, shapes moved. Large shapes, round shapes, cyclopes, the one-eyed giants, brothers of fire, masters of the old forge, builders of ancient wonders, the ones who shaped the thunderbolt Zeus now wielded, the ones who carved storms into metal, the ones who breathed life into weapons that could split mountains. When they turned toward Hephaestus, their single eyes widened with recognition not of his face, not of his name, but of the fire in his chest, a fire like theirs, a fire older than Olympus, a fire that belonged to the forge. The eldest Cyclops stepped forward, massive hands blackened with soot, voice deep as an earthquake rolling through ancient stone. "You have her fire," he rumbled. Hephaestus tilted his head slightly. "Whose?" he whispered. The Cyclops smiled, a slow, rare, rumbling smile. "Gaia," he said. "The Earth Mother, the first forge, the first heat. The one who birthed fire long before gods learned to claim it." Hephaestus felt the truth settle into him like molten gold sinking into a mold. The Cyclopes bowed to him, as if welcoming a long-lost brother, a fellow craftsman, one of their own. And in that moment, Hephaestus understood something profound. The forge was not just a place, it was a lineage, a legacy, a heartbeat that had waited centuries for his hands. The chamber opened before him like the inside of a star. Flames danced in enormous vats. Molten metal flowed in streams of red and gold. Sparks leapt like tiny shooting stars each time the Cyclopes struck an anvil. But nothing was harsh, nothing was violent. The fires did not roar. They breathed, slow, warm, soft, like Hephaestus, like a flame shaped by patience instead of fury. The forge was alive, alive not with destruction, but with creation, alive with the quiet rhythm of hammers beating like giant hearts, alive with the sighs of steam rising into cool air, alive with the glow of metal shifting from liquid to solid with reverent grace. Hephaestus stepped inside, his skin flushed with heat, his lungs filled with the scent of metal and fire. His heart quickened, not with fear, but with recognition. He walked toward an empty anvil that stood slightly apart from the others, as though waiting for him. The Cyclopes watched, silent, respectful, knowing. He placed his hand on the anvil, warm, smooth, waiting, and suddenly he knew this would be his place, his sanctuary, his heart, his voice. Zeus had the sky, Poseidon had the sea, Hades had the underworld, but Hephaestus, he had the forge, he had the fire, he had creation. He closed his eyes, and the forge spoke to him, not with words, with feeling, with pulse, with warmth. It whispered of metal waiting to be shaped. It whispered of tools too ancient for language. It whispered of stories forged into weapons, of destinies hammered into shields, of light captured in chariots, of songs resting in lyres, of moonbeams held in the curve of silver arrows. It whispered the name Helios, the sun who drove a blazing chariot across the sky. Hephaestus saw the broken wheel of Helios' chariot, cracked from centuries of solar heat. He saw the weakened spokes, the fading gold, and he saw how he could mend it, not with force, not with haste, but with artistry. He lifted a hammer. It felt like an extension of his hand, his arm, his will, his fire. The Cyclopes stepped back, making space. The forge quieted. Even the flames dimmed slightly. The first strike was soft, a chime rather than a clang, a whisper on metal, a breath. The next strike landed like a heartbeat, then another, and another, each tap shaping not only the metal, but the destiny it carried. Hephaestus lost himself in the rhythm, hammer rising, hammer falling, fire breathing, metal softening, strength forming. He moved with divine calm, with the grace of Eurynome, with the patience of Thetis, with the warmth of the vents that had shaped him, with the precision of someone who has survived exile and turned it into mastery. The chariot wheel of Helios gleamed brighter with every stroke, gold capturing flame, light capturing heat, fire capturing memory. The sun would ride smoothly again. Then came the arrows of Artemis, silver shafts dulled by time and moonlight. Hephaestus shaped them gently, as though crafting dreams instead of weapons. He embedded slivers of moonstone along their length, letting them catch light the way Artemis caught shadows. He strengthened the string of her bow with threads of divine metal, thin as spider silk, strong as mountain roots. He whispered to the bow, soft words only silver could understand. Then came Apollo's lyre, strings loosened, frame cracked, golden body faded by centuries of songs. Hephaestus repaired it with tenderness, like a healer mending a wound. He shaped the gold with warmth rather than heat, letting it melt into form like honey warming in the sun. He tightened the strings until they hummed with the resonance of dawn. He polished its frame until it glowed like morning light resting on quiet hills. When he plucked a single note, the entire forge trembled with beauty. Even the Cyclopes paused, even the flames bowed. The lyre sang like sunrise. Then came the armor of Ares, bent, dented, scarred by wars across continents. Hephaestus shaped it in silence, not because he feared the war god, but because he understood the weight of armor, the meaning of protection, the need for something strong to guard a fierce heart. He reforged the breastplate with quiet strength, smoothing the dents, filling the cracks, strengthening the metal until it gleamed like a disciplined flame. He shaped the shield with patterns reminiscent of storms, not chaotic but ordered, balanced. A reminder that even war needs rhythm. When he finished, the shield shone bright enough to reflect the entire forge. Ares would wield it with pride, even if he never admitted the gratitude in his heart. Then came the lightning of Zeus, the thunderbolt, the weapon that split sky from sky. The Cyclopes had forged the original, but even lightning ages. Hephaestus held the bolt gently, feeling the electric hum vibrate through his bones. He shaped the gold casing with steady hands. He fed the spark with molten metal, layer by layer, until the lightning crackled with renewed life. He whispered into it, words only thunder understands. When he handed it back to Zeus later, it hummed with such power that even the king of gods lifted his eyebrows. But the forge was not finished with him, and he was not finished with the forge. Night after night, day after day, time blended into a warm haze of fire and metal. Hephaestus created armor for heroes, jewels for goddesses, chains for titans, winged helmets for messengers, golden automatons who walked with elegance, bronze bulls who breathed steam, tripods that moved on their own like gentle servants. Every creation carried a piece of him, a piece of exile, a piece of sea, a piece of fire, a piece of longing, a piece of brilliance. The forge became the heart of Olympus. Its pulse flowed through every god's weapon. Its warmth glowed through every story you have heard before. Apollo's sunlight, Artemis moonlight, Ares war cry, Athena's armor, Zeus lightning. All of them passed through Hephaestus' hands. All of them were shaped by his quiet mastery. All of them carried the warmth of the one god who built more than he destroyed. And as the years passed, as the forge breathed brighter, as the Cyclopes worked at his side like brothers, Hephaestus came to understand something profound. Fire is not just heat. Fire is memory. Fire is transformation. Fire is the language of creation, and he was its speaker, the maker of Olympus, the quiet flame in the heart of the gods, the one who shaped destiny in metal and light. And the forge, in all its warmth and glow and endless hum, became the safest place in his soul, a home made not of marble, but of fire, not of power, but of purpose, not of perfection, but of patience. Here, Hephaestus was not the child who fell. He was the god who rose, the god who built, the god who burned gently. The forge glowed softly, warm like a sleeping star, steady like a heartbeat buried deep within the mountain. And within that glow stood Hephaestus, the quiet flame of Olympus, the maker whose hands shaped not only metal, but destiny itself. Many gods ruled, many commanded, many fought, many presided over oceans, skies, forests, and fates. But Hephaestus, in the gentle secrecy of his forge, shaped the very tools that allowed the gods to become who you know them to be. His work was not loud, not celebrated with parades or thunder. It was humble, slow, precise. It whispered instead of shouted, yet every whisper echoed across history, across myth, across the stories you have heard before in this series. Because every god, in one way or another, carried a piece of Hephaestus with them, a fragment of his craft, a spark of his fire, a mark of his patience. They wielded his work in war, in love, in prophecy, in punishment, in justice, in triumph, and even in tragedy. He was the architect behind their legends, the silent maker of Olympus, the unseen author of countless destinies. And tonight, we fall asleep to the quiet unfolding of those creations, the deep, glowing threads that tie every chapter of this series together. Let us begin with the sky. Let us begin with the king. Let us begin with Zeus. Because long before Hephaestus returned to Olympus, long before Hera recognized him, long before the sea healed him, the Cyclopes whispered stories of the first thunderbolt, the thunderbolt that crushed the Titans, the thunderbolt that crowned Zeus, king of the cosmos. But though the original weapon was forged by the Cyclopes, it was Hephaestus who renewed it, strengthened it, refined it into the symbol you have known throughout this entire series. Zeus lightning, the bolt he carries in every image, every sculpture, every myth whispered since ancient times shines with Hephaestus' hand. And when he reforged it in the quiet glow of his forge, He did so not with fear of Zeus, nor with desire for favor, but with a deep understanding of power. He polished the gold casing until it glowed like a piece of pure daylight. He shaped the metal so the thunder inside would travel smoothly, undisturbed, like a river of light. He bound the spark with layers of molten alloy, each layer whispering ancient formulas known only to the fires of the earth. He fed it power, heat, purpose, until the bolt sang like a storm ready to be born. Zeus lifted it in awe, feeling strength renewed not by his own might, but by the hands of the son he had forgotten. The thunderbolt became more than a weapon. It became a crown, a symbol, a reminder that power, even in the hands of a god, often comes from the quiet work of another. This was the first thread in the vast tapestry of creations. But the tapestry stretched much farther, across battlefields, across oceans, across the halls of heroes, and one such thread glimmered in the fires of Troy, Achilles' armor. You remember the war from the Apollo chapter, the clash of fate and pride, the tragic poetry of mortality intertwined with divine interference, the moment when Achilles lost his old armor, and Thetis, the same goddess who raised Hephaestus, came to Olympus pleading for a new one. It was here, in this tender reunion between foster mother and foster son, that another masterpiece was born. Thetis stepped into the forge softly, her sea-water gown dripping glowing droplets across the stone. Hephaestus looked at her with warm recognition, and without a word exchanged, he began to create. This armor would be different, not simply a shield for war, but a vessel of story, a world carved into bronze. The shield of Achilles would become one of the greatest works in myth, a creation so detailed, so poetic, so impossibly intricate that poets centuries later would try and fail to describe it fully. Hephaestus hammered worlds into that shield, cities dancing with music and celebration, fields where farmers bent to the rhythm of harvest, ships drifting across calm seas, stars carved into the bronze sky, the rising sun, the setting sun, the cycles of life, etched into concentric circles. It was a universe forged into a single disk of metal, a universe shaped by the hands of the god who understood both suffering and beauty. Hephaestus crafted it not for glory, but for Achilles, for the child of Thetis, for the hero destined for a brief, brilliant flame. He worked with quiet grief, knowing the armor was not meant to save Achilles, but to guide him toward fate. When Achilles wore it, he walked into legend. When he died, the armor lived on. A masterpiece shaped not by war alone, but by the love of a goddess and the craft of a god. But the forge did not rest. It shaped the weapons of Ares next. Ares, the god of war, whose footsteps echoed like thunder on the battlefield, whose breath carried the scent of fire and blood, whose armor rang with the desperate clamor of mortals locked in endless struggle. Ares came to the forge often, though he never stayed long, for patience was not his virtue. Hephaestus listened to his requests with serene calm, translating chaos into structure, fury into form, violence into art. He shaped swords that shimmered with deadly promise. He forged shields that could withstand the strike of giants. He crafted spears whose tips glowed with a red so deep it seemed to pulse. But he did not share Ares' hunger for destruction. Every weapon he made was balanced, measured, calm, a reminder that war, even in the hands of a god, requires intention, requires rhythm, requires control. Ares never admitted it aloud, but he trusted Hephaestus more than any other god, because only Hephaestus could shape weaponry fierce enough to match the war god's volatile heart. And still the forge glowed on, still the sparks danced like fireflies, still the creations multiplied, because Aphrodite needed jewels, and not just any jewels. Jewels worthy of the goddess who embodied beauty in its purest form. Jewels that shimmered like morning light on still water. Jewels that glowed like rose petals kissed by dawn. Hephaestus did not craft them out of devotion, nor out of longing for love. He crafted them out of respect, for beauty as a force of its own, as a power of its own, as a truth that deserved form. He shaped necklaces from gold, so delicate they seemed to float. He carved gemstones that held the blush of sunset. He forged girdles that shimmered with enchantment soft enough to feel like warm breath on skin. Aphrodite wore his work with pride, even if their marriage would never be the one he dreamed of, because beauty does not need to love the one who shaped its adornments. It only needs to shine, and Hephaestus allowed it to shine. From Aphrodite's glow, we follow another thread, a silver arc gliding through dark forests beneath the moon. The bow of Artemis, her arrows swift as moonlight, her bowstring singing like night wind. Artemis did not ask for beauty. She asked for perfection, for precision, for silence. Hephaestus listened. He studied the curve of her hand, the draw of her fingers, the tilt of her stance, the direction of her gaze. And then he forged a bow that moved like a living creature, silver that bent as gently as a branch in the forest, a string that hummed with celestial calm, arrows tipped with moonstone and shaped to fly not with noise, but with purpose. Artemis accepted them with a nod, a gesture small, but deeply meaningful. The goddess of the hunt rarely praised, but she used his creations again and again, trusting them with her life, her hunts, her vows. And finally, we come to Apollo, for the sun itself depended on Hephaestus' hands. The chariot of Helios, carrying the burning orb across the sky each day, needed constant repair. Solar heat warped its gold, friction cracked its spokes, time wore down its brilliance. Helios brought it to the forge often, and Hephaestus restored it each time with quiet reverence. He strengthened the wheels with heat-resistant alloys. He polished the frame until it shone brighter than dawn. He replaced frayed rein harnesses with enchanted metals that did not melt. The sun moved smoothly across the sky because a god in the shadows kept mending the light. And there was one more creation, one more thread, one more story that bound Hephaestus not only to Olympus but also to the deepest chambers of the underworld. The chains of Prometheus, forged not from cruelty but from necessity. Prometheus, the fire-bringer, the rebel against Zeus, had stolen the spark that Hephaestus himself understood better than any god. Zeus demanded punishment, justice, retribution. Hephaestus obeyed, but his hands were gentle even then. He shaped the chains with sorrow. He tempered them with regret. He forged them so they would hold, but not torture. Even punishment was something he crafted with care. And when he struck the final blow on those chains, he felt the sting of irony, a god born from fire, forging restraints for one who gave fire away. But that is the way of Olympus, the way of myth, the way of creation, interwoven with contradiction, with beauty, with tragedy, with purpose. And Hephaestus stood at the center of it all, the quiet architect who shaped every myth you have heard so far. This was only half the story, only the first glow of the forge. For the rest, the forge dimmed again, settling into a warm, steady hush, as though the flames themselves were listening to the quiet breathing of Olympus. Hephaestus stood at the center of it all, a craftsman surrounded by the echoes of his own creations, by the soft shimmer of metal remembering his touch, by the glow of wonders that had already shaped the world above. But the story of his creations does not end with weapons, nor with armor, nor with jewels that glitter on the throats of goddesses. It reaches deeper, wider, into places where fate trembles, where heroes rise and fall, where gods reshaped the cosmos with objects born from his hands. For every artifact was more than a tool. It was a thread woven into the fabric of myth, a thread Hephaestus spun with patience, with precision, with a quiet love for the act of creation itself. Let us follow those threads together. Let us drift through them like soft current beneath the sea. Let us see the worlds his hands altered, in the same calm glow as the forge that made them. Begin with Athena. For a long time, she observed Hephaestus from a distance, curious about the god shaped by exile, by flame, by the sea. She did not easily give respect. She demanded excellence, wisdom, craft, and Hephaestus earned it. The goddess of wisdom asked him for tools of knowledge, the first bronze compasses, the first celestial armillary spheres, the first blades that sliced not flesh but truth. In return, Hephaestus learned from her the geometry of the heavens, the structure of divine proportion, the language of precision. Together they forged ideas, together they shaped invention, together they laid the groundwork for every human city that would rise with artistry instead of brute strength. Hephaestus crafted her armor too, the aegis that hummed with the breath of storms, the spear whose tip glinted with perfect symmetry, the helmet shaped like silent resolve. Every battle Athena won carried his craftsmanship. Every victory whispered his name. And Athena, unlike many gods, never forgot who shaped the tools she wielded. She honored him in ideas, in wisdom, in silent partnership, another thread in the tapestry, another story shaped gently by his hand. But the deepest threads lay not with the gods of light, but with those who walked the shadows, with Hades, the quiet king of the underworld. Few visited the realm below unless summoned, but Hephaestus understood darkness. He had fallen through it once. He was not afraid. And so when Hades requested new gates for his realm, gates that could contain spirits and withstand the tremors of fate, Hephaestus descended into the underworld with steady steps. He crafted gates black as obsidian, but smooth as polished river stone. He forged hinges that opened only at the touch of truth. He sealed the borders between living and dead with chains that hummed with ancient lore. Hades watched silently, and when the gates closed for the first time, they sang like a low, eternal hum, a hymn of balance, a hymn of order. Even the dead listened. And in that moment, Hephaestus became more than the god of the forge. He became the quiet custodian of boundaries, a maker who preserved the line between worlds, a link in the mythic chain that ran from Zeus' judgments to Hades' responsibilities, a thread binding the high skies to the deep earth. Yet no creation tested him more than Pandora, the first woman, the first mystery, the first spark of mortal curiosity wrapped in divine form. Zeus commanded her creation as punishment for Prometheus, a counterbalance to fire stolen from the gods. And Hephaestus obeyed. But he obeyed with artistry, not cruelty. He shaped Pandora from clay infused with starlight, clay warmed by the forge, clay softened by ocean water that still clung to his memory. He crafted her with beauty unmatched, breath held within her chest like a whisper of dawn, every curve precise, every movement graceful. The gods gifted her virtues. Aphrodite gave charm, Hermes gave cunning, Athena gave poise. But the life in Pandora's eyes came from the hands of Hephaestus, a spark of his own divine warmth, a spark that understood beauty and danger and longing. The jar she carried, often called a box in later tales, was also his creation, smooth, polished, sealed with artful precision, made not to deceive, but to hold, to contain forces mortals were not meant to wield. when Pandora opened it, and the world was changed, people blamed her, blamed Zeus, blamed curiosity, but the truth is simpler, softer, sad in a way only Hephaestus understood. He crafted the jar as a boundary, a container for evils meant to remain still. But no boundary, however perfect, can restrain the heart forever. Hope remained at the bottom, because Hephaestus shaped the jar with room for it. A tender thought, hidden beneath divine politics. Another thread, another creation, another echo shaping myth. And then came the automatons, wonders ahead of their age. Golden servants that walked on gleaming legs, moved with quiet grace, and understood commands spoken in the language of thought. Hephaestus shaped them with solitude in mind. He forged golden maidens to keep him company in the forge, not to worship, not to entertain, but to understand. Their footsteps were soft, their gestures gentle, their presence warm, as close to companionship as a lonely god could ask for. Their existence alone was a miracle, proof that Hephaestus' genius extended not only to weapons and armor, but to lifelike creation. Machines before machines existed, souls made of gears and gold. Living art, silent comfort. Through them he learned empathy. Through them he learned the soft ache of wanting someone to stay. And through them he learned what it meant to give without expectation. Every creation touched Olympus. Every creation shaped gods you have met before in this series. Every creation whispered through the myths that lulled you into sleep over so many nights. Even mortals felt his influence. Every shield they carried, every plow they used, every tool that allowed civilization to rise. All were reflections of his divine craft. The spark mankind used to build homes, forge metal, shape statues, construct ships, came from him indirectly from the fire Prometheus stole, from the fire Hephaestus tended, from the fire that lived first in the forge beneath the sea, and then in the heart of Olympus. Hephaestus watched mortals grow, struggle, fail, succeed, and he felt pride, not in ownership, but in the quiet understanding that his work had become part of the world, part of every hearth, part of every craft, part of every human dream that began with the strike of a tool. Thunderbolts shone with his touch, armors gleamed with his patience, weapons blazed with his fire, chariots soared with his repairs, artifacts breathed with his brilliance. Olympus shone with his devotion, and myths, all myths, beat with a heart shaped by his hands. Hephaestus was not the loudest god, not the most celebrated, not the most worshipped, but he was the architect of all legends, the quiet flame in every story, the maker behind the curtain of immortality. And in this soft glow of the forge, we finally see him, not as the god who fell, not as the god who limped, not as the god who was forgotten, but as the god who built the world, one creation at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one quiet masterpiece at a time. In the quiet glow of the forge, after thunderbolts and shields and chariots and jewels, Hephaestus stood before a new command from Zeus, not a weapon, not a tool, not an instrument of war, but a creation unlike any he had ever shaped. A being, a life, a story woven from clay and breath. Pandora, the first woman, the first mortal shaped not by chance or nature, but by divine intention. And though history remembers her as a bearer of calamity, her beginning was soft, gentle, a quiet moment of artistry that lived in the shadows of Olympus. Zeus approached the forge with the solemnity of judgment, the weight of justice resting across his shoulders like a mantle of storm clouds. Prometheus had broken the delicate balance. He had stolen fire, the very fire Hephaestus tended, and placed it in mortal hands, not as rebellion, but as compassion. And compassion when it disrupts order, becomes a complex thing. Zeus did not come to punish, he came to restore balance. And balance, in his mind, required a gift shaped like a lesson, so he spoke softly, in a voice that rolled like distant thunder muffled by clouds. Hephaestus, he said, shape for me a being of clay, not a goddess, not a creature, but a woman, with grace, with beauty, with curiosity, with life. Hephaestus nodded, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with the quiet acceptance of an artist who understands that creation, whatever its purpose, must begin with tenderness. He gathered the soft clay warmed by his forge and cooled by the breaths of the golden automatons around him. Clay flecked with tiny sparks of fire, clay kissed with the memory of the ocean that raised him. He placed it gently on a stone slab, as though laying down a newborn dream. And then he began. He shaped Pandora with hands that knew both gentleness and strength. His palms pressed curves as soft as morning mist. His fingers traced lines delicate as moonlight on calm water. His breath warmed the clay until it felt alive beneath his touch. Her limbs took form like river paths bending toward the sea. Her face emerged from the clay like a dawn rising slowly over a quiet horizon. Hephaestus carved her eyes with patience, not to see punishment, but to see wonder. He molded her lips with the faint suggestion of a smile, not seductive, not deceptive, just the soft mystery of a being newly born. Her hair flowed from clay like ripples on the ocean floor. Her posture carried the grace of Eurynome, the calm of Thetis, the balance of Athena, the warmth of Aphrodite's glow. She was shaped from all the gentle things he had known. Hephaestus did not build her with anger. He did not shape her as a warning. He shaped her as creation, pure, intentional, sacred. When Zeus and the other gods gathered, they added their gifts like blossoms placed one by one into a cradle. Athena gave her poise, teaching her how to stand with dignity. Aphrodite gave her beauty, a gentle radiance that softened the eyes of all who beheld her. Hermes gave her voice, light and quick as a breeze dancing across autumn leaves. And the seasons blessed her with the scent of flowers, the freshness of spring, the glow of summer, the stillness of winter rest. Yet through all these gifts, her core remained clay, soft, malleable, made of earth and fire, made by hands that understood fragility and strength intertwined. Zeus placed into her care a jar, smooth, polished, a vessel crafted with the same precision Hephaestus used for stars and shields. It was not a curse, not a trap, not an omen. It was a boundary, a container meant to hold forces mortals were not yet ready to meet. Hephaestus sealed the jar with care, leaving inside a quiet glimmer of hope, a soft light resting beneath heavier truths. And when Pandora opened her eyes for the first time, the forge brightened, for in her gaze lay awe and innocence, and the faint spark of human curiosity, a spark not meant to harm, but to understand. She did not know of Prometheus, did not know of justice or retribution. She knew only that she had been shaped with care, given breath by gods, given gifts by the heavens, given a jar crafted with impossible beauty. She held it gently, as though holding a world. The myths remember her opening that jar. They remember shadows, and grief, and sickness escaping into mortal lands. But in a whisper-soft retelling, in the kind you hear before sleep, the moment becomes quieter. Not a scream, but a sigh. Not destruction, but release. Curiosity led her hand, a natural longing of a being shaped with wonder. And when the lid lifted, the world changed. But hope remained. Hephaestus had placed it there, soft, glowing, alive. The final gift, the final balance, the final kindness. For even in justice, he understood mercy, and even in order, he understood the need for light. Pandora walked among mortals afterward, carrying no malice, only the memory of clay warmed by divine hands. She touched lives with gentleness, with curiosity, with beauty shaped not from perfection, but from the soft vulnerability that makes life human. Her story was not a fall, it was an awakening, a reminder that creation is never simple, never pure light or pure shadow, but a blend, a meeting point, a space where clay meets fire, and fire becomes life. Hephaestus watched her go, not with regret, but with calm understanding, for he had shaped her with care, with art, with love for the act of creation itself. Pandora was his softest masterpiece, his quietest work, a story carved from clay and compassion. And though history would twist her tale, in the hush of this whispering myth, she remains what she truly was, a being shaped gently, a life crafted with intention, a gift carrying both questions and hope, as Hephaestus knew, always remains. Long after Pandora's soft creation, long after the forge shaped the destinies of gods and heroes, there came a time when Olympus turned its attention not to fire, nor to justice, but to the quiet, complicated realm of love, the kind of love that glows, the kind that wounds, the kind that flickers between longing and illusion. And at the center of that realm stood Aphrodite, the goddess born from sea foam and desire, the radiant force whose beauty softened even the sternest hearts. But her story, like every myth told in a whisper, was intertwined with another's. Hephaestus, the quiet maker, the patient smith, the god whose hands shaped wonders, but who struggled to shape connection. Their marriage was not forged from passion, not from adoration, not from the trembling urgency that binds hearts. It was a union woven from order, from necessity, from the political balance Zeus sought to maintain within Olympus, a marriage of beauty and craft, but not of hearts, a pairing of two divine forces who lived in entirely different worlds. Aphrodite moved through Olympus like a warm breeze, soft, bright, inviting. Every step she took left ripples in the hearts of gods and mortals alike. Her laughter stirred the air, her gaze softened the world. Hephaestus moved differently, slow, steady, quiet. His presence warmed the halls not with radiance, but with calm, with humility, with the soft glow of a forge burning behind his eyes. The day they were wed, Olympus celebrated with music, with garlands of roses, with feasts that stretched from the clouds to the horizon. Yet beneath the celebration, beneath the shimmering admiration for Aphrodite's beauty and the respectful nods toward Hephaestus' craft, there was an unspoken truth. This was not a joining of souls. It was a weaving of roles. Aphrodite belonged to the brightness of desire. Hephaestus belonged to the stillness of creation, and desire rarely rests in stillness. In your earlier journey through the tale of Aphrodite, you walked with her through stories filled with longing, with the gentle pulse of love, with the restless ache that defines her existence. You saw how her beauty was a force, how it moved like water, flowing everywhere, touching everyone, never staying in one place for long. It was natural, inevitable that her heart gravitated toward another flame. Ares, the god of war, the embodiment of impulse, of passion, of heat that flares without warning. Opposites, yet equals. Where Hephaestus' fire was slow and steady, Ares' fire erupted like a battlefield dawn. Where Hephaestus shaped beauty with patience, Ares chased beauty with urgency. Where Hephaestus worked alone, Ares demanded presence, attention, desire. It was not betrayal in the harsh sense the myths sometimes imply, but the natural alignment of forces that sought one another. Aphrodite and Ares were a storm, Hephaestus was a hearth, and storms rarely settle beside hearths. Aphrodite admired Hephaestus, admired his gentleness, his quiet devotion to craft, the way he could turn raw metal into miracles and broken things into beauty. But admiration is not love. Love, for her, lived in movement, in fire, in chaos. Hephaestus watched her from a place of reverence, not possession. He knew he could not bind her heart, just as he could not bind the wind or the waves. He never tried to change her, never tried to dim her, never tried to tame her radiance. Instead, he crafted jewels for her, necklaces that shimmered like dawn across the sea, bracelets that whispered against her skin like soft waves, girdles enchanted with glimmers of desire. Aphrodite wore them, smiling kindly, knowing the care woven into every detail. But her footsteps led elsewhere, to gardens where Ares waited, impatient and radiant, a storm calling to her like distant thunder. Hephaestus sensed it long before Olympus whispered. He felt it in the shift of her presence, in the way her voice carried longing, not for him, but for something wilder. Still, he did not withdraw his warmth. He did not close his forge to her. He did not let bitterness take root, for bitterness is a fire that consumes its own maker, and Hephaestus was a god who understood fire too well to misuse it. Their marriage remained a quiet arrangement, a tether of respect, a formal bond, a home where two divine forces coexisted without truly touching. When they sat together in the halls of Olympus, Aphrodite glowed like a rose-gold sunrise. Hephaestus glowed like a forge at dusk, warm, calm, trustworthy. There was no anger between them, only the hush of things unsaid. Aphrodite did not hide her affection for Ares, and Hephaestus did not demand fidelity. He only asked that she speak truth when truth was needed, and she did. She was a goddess of beauty, but also a goddess of honesty. Honesty in longing, honesty in desire. That honesty was her gentleness, and Hephaestus accepted it, for he loved her in his own quiet way, not with the consuming fire of Ares, not with the intoxicating spell of her other lovers, but with the steadfast glow of a flame that burns without demanding anything in return, a flame that warms without ever seeking to claim. Their home reflected this balance. Aphrodite's chambers were filled with roses, with silk and amber-scented light, with perfumes that drifted like dreams across the air. Hephaestus' forge burned deep beneath, filling the palace with steady warmth, a slow pulse that kept the night chill from reaching her windows. He built her a throne of gold, not to trap, but to honor. He forged mirrors framed in sunrise hues, so she could see her own radiance reflected clearly. He built delicate sculptures of her likeness, not as worship, but as study, as an artist learning the contours of light itself. She visited him often, not for love, but for comfort, for she knew his presence was safe, free of jealousy, free of storm, free of demand. She once asked him, softly, "Do you resent what I cannot give you?" Hephaestus smiled, a slow, ember-warm smile. "No," he murmured, "I only shape what I am asked to shape. And hearts," he added gently, "are not mine to forge." Aphrodite touched his cheek with gratitude, a touch not of passion, but of acknowledgement, of respect. Their marriage remained this way, balanced in its imbalance, whole in its incompleteness, quiet in its acceptance. Ares remained her flame, her storm, her wildness. Hephaestus remained her refuge, her calm, her gentle grounding. And though the world remembers the scandal of the golden net, of the trap that once caught lovers in delicate strands, In this softened retelling, the moment becomes something different, not humiliation, but clarity, a pause, a truth laid bare, a reminder that even immortals cannot force love into shape. Hephaestus wove that net not to harm, but to release himself from the illusion that beauty could be possessed. When the net fell, and the hall filled with startled gasps, Hephaestus did not laugh. He did not jeer. He simply stepped back, freed from an unspoken burden. After that moment, something softened between him and Aphrodite. Not distance, but understanding. They remained bound in marriage, but unbound in longing. She continued to shine, he continued to create, and their lives flowed alongside each other, like two rivers sharing a valley without ever merging into one. A marriage of beauty and craft, but not of hearts. A partnership not of passion, but of acceptance. And in its quiet truth, there was a kind of peace. A peace shaped gently, like clay beneath careful hands. A peace that allowed both gods to remain exactly who they were: Aphrodite, the flame; Hephaestus, the hearth. Different lights, different warmths, both essential to the soft, ever-burning glow of Olympus. In the soft glow of Olympus, where marble halls shimmered with morning light, and ambrosia perfumed the air like warm honey drifting through open windows, a quiet lesson unfolded. One woven not with swords, nor with thunder, but with intelligence as gentle and precise as a needle threading silk. A lesson shaped by Hephaestus, a lesson learned by Ares, and a lesson remembered through the ages as the moment when soft cleverness defeated fiery force. You remember Ares from earlier nights, a god of passion and impatience, a blazing spark that erupted into battle without hesitation, a storm of impulse shaped into divine form. He fought with the urgency of fire, with the roar of a battlefield rising, with the swift certainty of instinct. He was strength without strategy, heat without calm, motion without pause. And Aphrodite, bright as sunrise, was drawn to that intensity like a moth to flame. Their meetings were secret, their affection wild, their connection born from sparks that refused to stay still. But in Olympus, nothing remains hidden forever, especially not from Hephaestus, the quiet observer, the steady flame, the god whose calm patience sharpened his mind. As much as his forge sharpened bronze, he did not seek vengeance, he did not burn with jealousy, he did not confront Ares with rage. Instead, he stepped into the forge, closed the great stone doors behind him, and let silence guide him. The fire breathed softly, casting warm light on the tools that lined the walls. And in that glow, Hephaestus crafted his plan, not with anger, not with spite, but with quiet ingenuity, the kind born from years of shaping metal, from years of studying pressure, tension, balance, weakness, strength. He began to weave the golden net, a creation unlike anything forged in his halls before. Its threads were fine as strands of dawn, thin as sunlit spider silk, but infused with the strength of divine metal. Metal tempered by patience, by intelligence, by soft understanding of exactly where Ares was strong and exactly where he was weak. Hephaestus crafted each thread with deliberate care, letting the metal cool slowly, letting it stretch without breaking, letting it remember the shape he intended it to take. It shimmered as it formed, a curtain of light, a web of molten gold hardened into near invisibility. By the time it was finished, the net was lighter than air, yet stronger than any chain in the underworld. A paradox, a masterpiece, a testament to the quiet brilliance of a god too often underestimated. And so Hephaestus laid his trap, not in darkness, not in secrecy, but in the soft, warm comfort of his own home. a place Ares believed he would never see, a place Aphrodite visited often, seeking gentleness to balance the fire she loved elsewhere. He draped the net across his marriage bed, positioning it with the precision of a jeweler placing gems into a crown. The golden threads blended with the sheets, invisible to eyes that searched only for pleasure, not wisdom, not consequence, not the quiet strength of forethought. When Ares and Aphrodite arrived, drawn by the pull of their irresistible flame, the net lay waiting. They stepped into the room with laughter in their voices, soft and breathless. Ares moved with that same urgency you have seen before. No caution, no pause, only hunger for the moment. Aphrodite glowed like a rose bathed in starlight, and together they sank into the bed. The net responded instantly. It tightened with a whisper. It wrapped around them like a cocoon of shimmering light. Not painful, not violent, but firm, unyielding. Ares thrashed instinctively, the battle reflex, the surge of hot anger, but strength had no meaning here. He could not break what was shaped by intelligence. He could not overpower what was forged from patience. And, as he pulled harder, the net held faster. The trap was perfect, a masterpiece that revealed not Ares' shame, but Hephaestus' mind. Hephaestus walked in with quiet steps. He did not shout, he did not gloat, he did not let anger burn in his voice. He simply stood at the foot of the bed, looking at them with eyes that held more sadness than fury. "You are strong, Ares," he said softly, "but strength is not always enough." Ares froze at that, because those words, soft, calm, unshaken, cut deeper than any blade forged in Olympus. Aphrodite looked away, not with guilt, but with understanding. She knew Hephaestus did not seek to punish her. He sought only truth, a moment of clarity, shaped not by battle, but by silence. One by one, the gods gathered, not in mockery, but in curiosity. Even Poseidon smiled quietly. Even Hera, once hardened by pride, saw in Hephaestus act not cruelty, but wisdom. Ares, trapped by a net he could not break, lowered his head, humility. A rare guest in the presence of the war god, settled on his shoulders like a soft cloak. Hephaestus touched the corner of the net, and with a whisper, the golden strands dissolved, unraveling into warm flecks of light. Ares stood slowly, his pride bruised, but his spirit not crushed. He looked at Hephaestus, and for the first time there was respect in his eyes. Not fondness, not friendship, but the recognition that brains could overcome brawn, that calm could outshine fury, that intelligence could tame fire. The lessons settled on Olympus like a soft snowfall, quiet, gentle, transformative. Hephaestus did not lecture, he did not boast. He simply returned to his forge, letting the warmth of his fire swallow the echoes of the day. And Ares carried that moment with him into every battle afterward, a reminder that force without strategy falters, that passion without thought collapses, that even the god of war must occasionally bow to the quiet power of a clever mind. In the end, the golden net was not a trap, not a punishment, not a spectacle. It was a whisper of truth, a reminder that intelligence, when shaped with patience and compassion, can be stronger than any sword. And Hephaestus, the gentle flame of Olympus, had once again proved that the softest creations are often the most enduring. After the golden net dissolved into soft flecks of fading light, after Ares walked away steadier than he arrived, after Olympus exhaled its tension like a long-held breath finally released, Hephaestus returned to his forge, calm, steady, content in his quiet truth. But there was still one thread left to weave in this tapestry of myths, one story that reached from the forge to the wisdom of Athena, to the earth itself, to a newborn child who would one day shape a city of unparalleled brilliance. A story of fate, of earth, of silent beginnings. A story of Erichthonius, the child of Athena and the earth, born in the shadow of Hephaestus' longing, yet destined to rise as the first king of Athens. To understand him, we must return to the gentle spaces between desire and restraint, where Hephaestus and Athena once stood. Athena, as you remember from earlier nights, was wisdom given form, calm, collected, brilliant like the sharp gleam of a blade polished under moonlight. She did not love as Aphrodite loved, nor hunger as Ares hungered. Her heart was made for purpose, for justice, for clarity, and yet, even in the realm of gods, misunderstandings arise like soft storms drifting unexpectedly across a clear sky. Hephaestus admired her, not with passion, but with reverence. Admired her mind, her unwavering resolve, the way she moved like an idea shaped into flesh. He longed not to possess her, but to be understood by her. A meeting of craft and wisdom. Athena visited his forge often, studying his techniques, exchanging quiet insights, admiring his patience. It was during one such visit that a moment of longing led to a moment of mistake. Hephaestus reached for her not out of lust, but out of a deep, aching need for connection. Athena stepped back, calm as always, clear as always, unyielding as always. She was untouched, untouchable, a goddess whose heart belonged to purpose, not to romance. Yet in the brief tangle of movement, a fragment of divine essence escaped Hephaestus, falling to the earth like a spark slipping from the forge. Athena, with a wisdom that flowed forward like water, did not turn away. She did not recoil. She lifted the spark gently, wrapped it in her calm, and carried it to Gaia, the Earth Mother, a gesture not of rejection, but of redirection, a gesture that said, "Let creation find another path," and Gaia, who cradles seeds and cities alike, accepted the spark. From that union, wisdom guiding craft, earth nurturing divine potential, a child formed, a child without a mother, without a father in the mortal sense, but born from intention, born from destiny, born from the meeting of gods and earth. Erichthonius, his body was wrapped in the warm soil of Gaia's embrace, but his spirit shimmered with Athena's clarity and Hephaestus' inner fire. Athena lifted him from the earth with care, holding him as gently as Thetis once held Hephaestus. Her touch steady, her gaze soft with a rare tenderness rarely seen on Olympus. She placed him in a small woven basket and entrusted him to the daughters of Cecrops, the first mortal king of Athens. "Guard him," she whispered, "for he is the future." But the basket held a secret, a truth too divine for mortal eyes. And when curiosity overcame the daughters, they peered inside and saw the serpent coils that protected the infant. Symbol of earth, symbol of rebirth, symbol of mystery. Fear overtook them, and tragedy followed, as it often does when mortals glimpse truths not meant for them. Athena returned, calm even in sorrow, and lifted the child back into her arms. She raised him herself, teaching him wisdom, teaching him balance, teaching him to listen to the earth as she did. As he grew, Erichthonius became a bridge between gods and mortals, between earth and sky, between craft and wisdom. He built the first chariot, a gift of ingenuity inspired by Hephaestus' forge and Athena's insight. He founded the rituals that honored both earth and goddess, shaping the early character of Athens, long before its marble temples gleamed in the sun. When he became king, Athens transformed, not into a city of war, not into a city of indulgence, but into a city of thought, of craft, of justice, of philosophy, of quiet brilliance. A city shaped by the meeting of Hephaestus and Athena. A city shaped by fire and mind. A city shaped by Erichthonius. His rule connected the divine teachings of Athena to the mortal world. His inventions echoed the subtle creativity of Hephaestus. His respect for earth honored Gaia's gentle strength. He was the physical embodiment of the soft, quiet forces that guide destiny without demanding attention. He was the child of wisdom and earth, the heir of craft and clarity. The spark born from a mistake turned into a miracle, because in myth, even a misstep can bloom into purpose. When guided by the right hands, Athena watched over Erichthonius until the end, and when he died, she placed his spirit among the stars. Hephaestus, from his forge, saw the constellation shimmer, recognized his own faint echo within the child's legacy, and allowed himself a rare, quiet smile. For through Erichthonius, the worlds of Athena and Hephaestus intertwined forever, a thread that wove through Athens, through wisdom, through invention, through myth, and in the soft night sky above Olympus, two lights glowed brighter than the rest, wisdom's star and craft's flame, separate but always connected, like Athena and Hephaestus, like earth and fire, like the stories that lull you into sleep, each one touching the next in quiet, gentle harmony. There is a gentle truth hidden in the folds of mythology, a truth that says every god has a land where their spirit rests most naturally, where their power breathes freely, where their story settles into the earth like seeds waiting for spring. For Hephaestus, that land was not Olympus. It was not the silent depths beneath the sea. It was not the roaring chambers of battlefields or the airy peaks of divine politics. It was Lemnos, a place of fire, a place of warmth, a place shaped by quiet transformation. Lemnos lay on the edge of the northern Aegean Sea, its shores kissed by gentle winds, its volcanic heart pulsing with the same ancient heat that once embraced Hephaestus as a newborn falling from heaven. The people of Lemnos believed the island's fire lived because Hephaestus willed it, because his forge slept beneath their soil, because his breath warmed their stones. They worshipped him not with fear, not with thunder, but with devotion born from gratitude. They understood the god of fire not as destroyer, but as maker, a quiet guardian of transformation. And every 9 years, when the sacred flame of Lemnos was ritually extinguished, an entire island stood still. 9 days without fire, 9 nights of cool darkness, 9 breaths held by the people who waited for renewal. It mirrored the 9 days Hephaestus once fell from Olympus, 9 days that shaped his fate, 9 days that taught him patience, 9 days that brought him from rejection to rebirth. During those nights of darkness, no hearth burned, no forge glowed, no lamp flickered. The island exhaled, letting the world grow quiet, letting sleep settle gently across every cliff and village. And on the 9th day, a sacred ship would return from Delos, the island of Apollo, where the twin gods of light, Apollo and Artemis, watched over purity and rebirth. From Delos, priests carried a single flame, protected by clay pots and woven cloth, cradled like a newborn star. When they brought this flame to Lemnos, the entire island gathered. Hephaestus' devotees bowed in silence. As the new fire was placed upon the central altar, a single spark, a single breath, a single beginning. From that flame, every home would relight its hearth. Every workshop would return to life. Every forge would hum again. Fire reborn, life renewed. Hephaestus' presence felt not in thunder, but in warmth. in patience, in the quiet glow of a small flame, passed from hand to hand. While Lemnos held his fire, Athens held his lineage. You remember from our earlier chapter that Erichthonius, born from the meeting of craft and wisdom, became one of the first kings of Athens. Under Athena's guidance, he shaped the city into a sanctuary of thought, a home for philosophy, for invention, for artistry. And in Athens, Hephaestus' name was spoken with reverence, not only as a god of fire, but as a god of skill, a god of creation, a god whose hands could turn raw ore into possibility. The Athenians built a temple for him and Athena together, a rare pairing honoring the balance between mind and craft, wisdom and work, idea and action, thought and fire. And within that temple, offerings of small bronze figurines lay scattered like whispers of devotion, figurines shaped by craftsmen who thanked Hephaestus for their abilities, for their quiet focus, for the steady patience of their hands. Athens remembered him not as the lame god, not as the rejected child, but as the divine artisan who shaped the world as gently as dawn shapes the sky. And then there was Samothrace, the island of mystery, a place wrapped in wind, in secrets, in rituals, older than Olympus itself. The great mysteries of Samothrace honored gods who protected sailors, who guided travelers, who shielded the vulnerable. And Hephaestus was among them, not loudly, not prominently, but with a soft, steady presence, like a lantern carried through fog. The people believed he forged talismans in the night, small amulets glowing faintly with hidden power, objects that brought safety, serenity, a sense of unseen guidance. Hephaestus was the god of travelers' hope, the god of quiet protection, the god whose fire illuminated paths too dark for mortal sight. In Samothrace, he was honored not for his masterpieces, but for his gentleness, for the warmth he gave to those who felt lost, alone, unseen, just as he once had. Across these lands, Lemnos with its sacred fire, Athens with its wisdom and innovation, Samothrace with its quiet mysteries, Hephaestus lived in a form deeper than his stories. He was a whisper, a warmth, a presence, a soft flame in the heart of ancient Greece. And now, as our story moves toward its close, you can see how every place, every myth, every connection circles back to him, to the god of gentle fire, to the maker of destinies, to the child who fell, the craftsman who rose, the flame that warmed Olympus from the shadows. This is the quiet truth of Hephaestus. His divinity did not roar. It glowed, it shaped, it softened, and through Lemnos, through Athens, through Samothrace, his fire travels still. A flame passed from generation to generation, a whisper carried by wind and stone, a reminder that warmth survives, even the coldest myths. As we step into the next chapter, let this gentle thought rest with you. Fire can burn, but it can also breathe. It can rage, but it can also guide. And the softest flame, when tended with care, can warm an entire world.